Hello. I was perusing a chat and for Star Wars nerds, and I saw some mentions of the Gray Jedi. So I thought I would make a video explaining what a Gray Jedi is and some of the misconceptions and misunderstandings that people have about the Force and um, our relationship to it and the Jedi. So in Star Wars, there's this idea of a gray Jedi, right? I mean, people have heard the term. If you're into Star Wars a little bit, you've heard the word gray Jedi, and there's a lot of people that say that there's like a gray Jedi code, and that there's like a group of people that identify as gray Jedi, but this just isn't true. Um, there's Jedi, and then there's like Jedi that look down on other Jedi for not being as Jedi as them, and then they call them gray Jedi. It's like calling someone apostate, right? Like it's like, oh, you're gray, like you're a gray Jedi. You don't follow the doctrine as well as we do. So that's what the term gray Jedi is referring to. There isn't a gray Jedi code. It's like a fanon thing. It's a made up thing by the fans. But fundamentally, this is a flawed concept. It's a fun concept, and it points to the fact that people are trying to point to that there is the nature of the Force is about balance, but they just don't understand that nature very well, or articulately enough to realize that it isn't about being between light and dark. It's about being in the light, because darkness is an absence of light. It's not real. It's just I have my notes here. Okay, well, there, yeah. um, so darkness is an absence of what's real, an absence of light. Light is what's real, what's really real, like what's more real than our own subjective realities, or our own experiences. And so to be a Jedi, you should serve the light. You should serve what is real. You should try to avoid having your experience limited in the dark. In other words, limited in a way that like you can't see what's going on. So darkness, it's like the whole light versus dark dichotomy in Star Wars is initially not so articulate, but it was expanded upon in the expanded universe and the continuity canon works. We learned about the living force, the idea of the living force, and we learned about the idea of the unifying force. And there's a few other force philosophies by different religious organizations that are also of interest. For example, the white current from the Varanasi. And the interesting thing about Star Wars is mythologically, like in universe, there's people with their own mythos, and they're trying to understand and articulate their own mythos, much like we are. And there are people that come to realizations about the nature of the cosmos in Star Wars, that help them understand it a lot better and help us understand it a lot better. And so the idea of the living force is that there's so Qui-Gon is often seen as a a gray Jedi, because he did not follow the code, and Jedi looked down on him for that. They thought he's like one of them. But his view of the Force was, or emphasized the living force. His philosophy emphasized the living force. The living force is a standard Jedi concept of the Force, which is that there's like living things that have needs, right? So like evil or sin or whatever. It's like this kind of, I guess, like the Taoists say, this opaqueness, this this lack of something good. Like if you're starving and you kill someone for food, it's like that's bad, but you were starving, and so your natural processes motivated you to take measures, to take drastic measures to survive, and there's that kind of machine-like compulsion in the natural things and natural things, the natural processes of nature that that is something we have to pay attention to. It's like, okay, there's the living force, and you have to take care of it. It has to live, and if it's like threatened, if it's gonna die, it's gonna like be like, it's gonna freak out and try to live through means that might not be optimal. And so the living force is about living things that need to live and survive and have their ways of making sure that they do so. And so it emphasizes feelings, and I'm like, okay, I'm sad or I'm angry or this or that. It's like, if you pay attention to the living force, you're aware that people have needs and emotions and things that speak about their circumstances and what they lack and what they need and what they have. So that's one view of the force, or one area of attention. I'm winging it again, by the way, so my brain is coming up with all this one spot. The unifying force is similar to the white current, and the white current is this idea that life is like this river, and there's the purest river of all is the one that you want to be in, and so you try to steer your river to that river, and you align yourself with the white current, and you just kind of like flow with what is good, which is really just basically doing what's right with the idea of the unifying force. The unifying force is the idea that the force is just the force, and it's neither light and dark, it's just good. And the term light is like describing, the reason why we use the terms light and dark is because it's the easiest way to understand the nature of the force. It's like, what is light, but what's real? There's real light, as opposed to what is dark, which is not real. It's the absence of what is light. It's like darkness is an idea and exists as a reality, like as a way things are, to the extent that to the extent that it is something you can experience when there's an absence of what is light, or what is real. So light is really the only thing you should be concerned with, which is why being a Jedi, is about serving the light, not being stuck in the dark. And when I say stuck, I mean, like, I don't mean serving the dark, because it's not something you serve, it's something that you get stuck in. It's like the dark side of the force, like, Sith, let's say Sith, for example, their philosophy is self-servitude. Their philosophy isn't actually darkness, it's just self-servitude. It's about power. It's about getting more, becoming more powerful. And if you look at the history of the Sith, this is perfectly understandable. The living force, after all, the Sith were indeed almost destroyed at the hands of the Rakatan Infinite Empire. Their planet was basically glassed. Korriban was glassed, turned to a desert, much like what happened to Tatooine. And a lot of their people died, and they had to live out the rest of their existence on that terrible planet. They had to survive. And so they looked up at the stars and they swore to take vengeance. It's like there's this natural feeling of like, we were wronged and we need to make it right. But because they didn't know how to make it right, they were just using the natural processes of nature, they were letting that guide them. It's like, okay, there's this anger. Where are you going to put it? Something needs to change. And of course, it's easier to look outward and be like, okay, the stars wronged us. Now we will conquer the stars. And so that's where Sith culture originates from. And an interesting thing about Sith culture is you need to differentiate between Sith species and Sith culture. The Sith as a species weren't all culturally Sith. And of course, other people that weren't Sith species were Sith culture. But Sith culture is basically like, okay, I will own everything. I will conquer everything. I will have all the power. That way nothing can ever wrong me again. So that's like, it's kind of gotten disconnected, of course, from the original problem. The Cat and Infinite Empire came in and like destroyed the Sith homeworld and left them destitute. And then, of course, the Republic comes along and they're like, oh, we're gonna fight you and destroy you. And so the Republic's actually, no, you're not gonna do that. Slap. And then the Jedi are like with the Republic and it's like, yeah, we're not gonna let you do that either. Slap. And so there's just all these instances where people are like forced to respond to their belligerence. It's like the Sith want to conquer the stars. They're like, we will own the stars in vengeance. We will conquer everything. So that we'll never be destitute again, But that's not a really nice way of going about things. No one else likes that, It's like, okay, we can't deal with your warfaring, despotism. It's like, we're just going to keep slapping you down every time you try to rise up and take control of stuff, And so that's like all these other things that the Sith are like, okay, now you've wronged us, And of course, the biggest enemy of all, the Jedi, is like, okay, these people claim to, be in the interests of everyone else instead of themselves, but they have all this power, It's like, yeah, they do have a lot of power, but is like power necessarily a bad thing? Or is it how you use your power, right? The Sith want to use their power to like conquer everything, enslave people, and destroy things. It's like, I think it's better to use power to like maintain peace and to do what's good, Which is like, although Palpatine actually has something really wise to say to Anakin, where he says, if one wants to understand the great mystery, one must study all its aspects, not just the dogmatic narrow view of the Jedi, And the interesting thing about that is it's true. You have to study all the aspects, and the Jedi were dogmatic. But that doesn't mean he was right in his efforts. Palpatine had the same self-servitude and tyranny of him that all the other Sith of old had. Sith, cultural Sith, not Sith species. Sith that adhere to that culture of trying to conquer everything. And the Jedi were dogmatic. They had that's why they were destroyed. In fact, the prequels are that whole story arc about the Jedi being destroyed by Palpatine is a lesson on the dangers of dogma and how choosing not to continually pursue what is good with self-responsibility and self-sufficiency will lead to complacency, and how that complacency will lead you to darkness. So the Jedi did not serve light in the prequels. They were stuck in the darkness. They were not in the light. They were blind. They were in the dark, literally, or spiritually, figuratively, but literally in that sense, which is why they were destroyed, because that's what happens, is when you're not good enough, something that's more powerful than you is going to come and wipe you out if you're not ready for it. And so this is a very interesting thing that you can see happen in the Book of Mormon, for example. If you read the Book of Mormon, a very interesting pattern of people that had good roots let themselves become complacent spiritually, and then they were destroyed. So that's what happened to the Jedi. They became complacent. They became dogmatic. They became more concerned on doctrine and rules and technicalities and laws than they became concerned with just doing what's right with the Force. It's like, okay, if you just like keep yourself open to the Force and continually pursue being in that light and serving that light and being aware and being your own source order, because they didn't do that. They fell into the dark and were destroyed by the Sith, much like the Nephites were destroyed by the Lamanites. And so yeah, the Grey Jedi, they don't exist as a group of people. It's just it's an insult that you hurl at someone if you think that they're being less holy than you. Basically, if you're a Jedi, it's like calling someone apostate. And the Grey Jedi Code is doesn't exist either. It's just, there's a Jedi Code. There's a true Jedi Code, an old Jedi Code from the ancient Jedi Order about staying in the light and recognizing the nature of things, being like a true Jedi, like a Taoist, like not too concerned with the laws and the technicalities, but being more concerned with following the Force, and serving the light as an individual rather than as an organization with regulations and protocol. Which of course are needed to an extent, right? But there's a limit to these things. There's like a there's a limit. There's a time and a place for laws and regulations, and then there's also a time and a place to not worry about them, and learning how to navigate that. Stay balanced in that state of unbalance, of constant chaos confronting your, coming to your doorstep, confronting it with order. It's like there's a way to stay balanced in that without letting superficial order start pervading your lifestyle and causing you to fall into complacency. So yeah, being a true Jedi is about being in the light, and that's good. It's about doing what's good, really, and that's just in essence following the light, striving for the light. And the darkness is the state that you fall into when you're not striving for the light. And the Jedi of the prequel era, the Old Republic, had fallen into darkness, and they were destroyed for it. And so there's not really a gray area. There, when people are excited about the Grey Jedi, they think that there's this balance between dark and light. They treat dark and light as if they're both real and they both have value. But it really depends on how you understand dark and light philosophically. Considering the language that we're using, light and dark are pretty straightforward. They mean what they mean. Darkness is an absence of light, and light is what is bright and allows you to see. So it's very straightforward, mythologically, that light is what's good and dark is what's evil. And that there's no balance between them, but there is a balance inside you between the part of you that is able to fall into darkness easily and the part of you that keeps you in the light, or that tries to keep you in the light. And both parts of you can fall into darkness, can cause you to fall into darkness. The heart and the mind, the heart, the living force, the creative side of you that is concerned with survival, and value. Well, I guess really it's not really too concerned with survival. They're both your heart and your mind are concerned with survival, but the heart approaches survival through creativity and value, and the mind approaches survival through limitations and risk assessment and engineering, refining. And so both of these parts of you can fall out of balance. One of them can take precedence over the other, and then things go out of whack, or the other one can take precedence, and then you become apathetic. It's like too much heart, and you come up with this great plan, this great creative, valuable plan to destroy everything. And the mind takes over, and it's like you come up with nothing, and you become depressed because every idea isn't worth it. Every idea gets refined away until you've left with nothing. So you need this balance, and there is a need for balance between the dark and light side of you. The heart is comparable to the darkness because it leaves you blind when you follow it. There's too much feelings and passion and stuff, and like when there's not enough reasoning from the mind, it just forward into whatever it is you're charging straight at without enough thought to keep you from doing something wrong. But the mind is comparable to light because it's aware. It keeps an eye out for risk. It's like, okay, where are the limits? Where do we place order? And so in that sense, you need to be in balance between light and dark. And in that sense, you still don't want to be gray. Because I don't know, gray feels synonymous with apathy and jadedness. I don't think that's a good description of mixing light and dark. I think that mixing light and dark is still light and dark. In fact, we have symbols for this. The yin yang symbol, for example, Tai Chi symbol, right? Of the light coming out of the darkness and the darkness coming out of the light and spiraling around each other in balance. That's a symbol for balance between light and dark. It's not gray, it's still light and dark, but they're working together. And that is something that I think is important to understand, is that there's still fundamentally a heart and a mind, and that they are different. And they need to work together. But that's talking about it from a psychological perspective. That's not talking about the philosophical, inconceivable nature of nature perspective of the force itself, which is only light, as we see from the unifying force and the white current, which I'm not going to say are my reasons, but those are good examples of understanding the force in a way that is pure. It's like, okay, there's just the force, and following it is good. And when we blind ourselves to things, to the living force, the nature of how of things and how things are, and when we become dogmatic or complacent, we fall into darkness. We fall away from the force. We can still use the force. It's like the Tao, it's like you can use it any way you want. But the intelligence, the order, the godly order of eternity is something that takes effort to follow. You have to choose it. You have to go, I'm going to follow the light. And saying that you're a gray Jedi is like saying that, I mean, it's a limited understanding of the nature of light and dark, and I'm hoping that clears things up. I hope I didn't upset anyone. I used to like gray Jedi stuff too. I used to think it's like, oh yeah, I'm a gray Jedi. If I was a Jedi, I'd be a gray Jedi. But maybe you wouldn't be a gray Jedi, but you would be a true Jedi, a real Jedi, a Jedi that hasn't fallen into darkness. You know, not a Jedi that obviously chose darkness by just becoming super angry and turning into a dark Jedi, but like a Jedi that has fooled themselves into thinking that they're still serving the light when they weren't, and falling into darkness, slowly led captive by the change of the devil, away into hell. Which, yeah, the galaxy definitely did descend into hell after that. So, yeah. I hope that clears things up. I covered the topics of what gray Jedi actually means. It's a slur used to separate your holier than thou self from those heathens that don't follow the Jedi code to the letter. If you're a dogmatic Jedi that doesn't understand the nature of the code in the first place. And then I covered the nature of the Force, how that relates to the idea of the gray Jedi and the misconceptions about it, and what it means to really be a Jedi, and what it means to be a Sith, and why the Sith are the Sith, and why the Jedi are the Jedi, and how the Jedi were destroyed by their dogma, and other Force philosophies or philosophical takes on the Force that help give us context. The living Force, the unifying Force, the white current, yeah, the nature of light and dark, and how darkness is an absence of light, and that there's only the light, and how this relates to us psychologically, and how it's different a little bit psychologically, the symbolism, yeah, how the mind and reasoning versus passion, and how falling into darkness is can come from both reason and passion when they're out of balance. How balance has to come from within, that the Force is already in balance with itself. Yeah, I guess that wraps it up.